Thank you very much for joining us at the Money20 Fireside chat here with Thales. Today we'll be just talking about designing a token-centric future and where the vision meets reality, and of course talking about the new report that was just recently released. First of all, I think tokenization has been part of payments for years. But what is changing now is actually the role that's at the very center of digital commerce and the speed at which this shift is now happening. To ground this discussion in real-world data, we are drawing on a new global study conducted by Forrester based on the insights from over 500 decision makers across the ecosystem. This research was, of course, commissioned by Thales to understand how organizations are navigating tokenization today and what's holding them back. So let me first introduce the panel. Diane Deng is a principal analyst at Forrester, where she's advising financial institutions on payments, digital transformation, and emerging technologies. She brings a data-driven perspective on market trends grounded in global research and real-world benchmarks across the payments ecosystem. Then we have Cyril Reis, who is the strategic director at Thales, where he focuses on payment strategy, tokenization, and modern card issuing. He works with leading financial institutions on how to bridge physical and digital payments and scale next-generation payment infrastructure. And then, of course, we have Cyril Willeman, leads payments for Europe at Thales, working with banks, fintechs, and payments providers across the region. He brings a strong perspective on how digital wallets and tokenizations are reshaping e-commerce and becoming the foundation for the next-generation frictionless payments. So, Kyle, let us start at a strategic level. What is actually changing in payments today?
I would say that today, the major shift that we see is happening at three different layers. So the layer number one is on consumer side. The second one is on the financial products that are provided to those consumers. And the third one is on infrastructure. And if we start first with the consumer side, I think that we clearly see that the power has shifted to the hands of the end users. So now they have more choice than ever. Take banks like Revolut, Monzo, Starling, N26. If you just sum the number of end users that those banks have today, is over 70 million users just in Europe itself. All of them having access to freemium offers. That means that if you sum up what these banks are somehow free in terms of fees that are not being paid to banks, but they are being collected or kept with the end users, that's billions of euros that they are helping to save in the overall economy. So this is one of the biggest challenges and big shifts that we saw. So end users here are looking for simplicity, customer experience, rewards. So they have the choice in their hands now and they can make the shift whenever they want. The second point, which is related to building the consumer products. I think that for years, banks were building products that were, let's say, generic, one-size-fits-all offers. And this has shifted now into building much more strong value propositions for the consumers. So it means that digital banks, traditional banks, and better finance companies, they all have to build products that are fitting specific use cases on the market. So take, for instance, the teenage cards, the cards that are coming out there for crypto holders, for corporate use cases. So there are many innovations that are coming more towards use cases, products that are designed to fit a specific need from the end users. And the third one is about infrastructure. I think that infrastructure, there is a big shift as well. We've been talking about cloud, we've been talking about moving to SaaS, composable platforms. There is a silent shift that is happening on the market now. It is about tokenization. So the tokenization is one of the strongest pillars that is supporting all of this innovation on the market. And this is one of the things that people are not often talking about. Today, over more than three times of the number of payment cards in the industry are tokenized. So for one single payment transactions, there are at least 3 tokens out there. And the same when we look at transactions, over 40% of the transactions nowadays are coming from tokens. So what is happening is that before what was just coming to support mobile payments is becoming an element that is core of the infrastructure of all of the banks. So that means that now you have to look at tokenization as a core element of your infrastructure, is no longer an adjacent service that you should have. So banks are really thinking about how can we support that shift, how I can partner with someone that can help me to, number one, improve my authorization rates, number two, reduce my fraud, and number three, improve the overall customer experience as well.
Absolutely. So I think you're describing a pretty fundamental shift from pretty much legacy infrastructure to something much more dynamic. Now, to understand whether the market is really keeping up with that shift, it's worth grounding this in data. So, Diane, your team at Forrester recently conducted a global study, speaking with over 500 decision makers across banks, payments providers, and digital players. The research commissioned by Thales looked at whether those organizations stand today on payment, on tokenization. What is working and where the gaps still are. So based on that, what are you actually seeing across the market data?
Yeah, so what we're seeing across the market, one of the biggest headline is tokens are very widely accepted, but not really operationalized well. So across the 500 responses we received, what we found are there are three top drivers for tokenization, very aligned with what Cal mentioned. The first one is fraud reduction and chargeback reduction. And it's already proven that tokenization has become the foundation for card fraud reduction. And the second part is the authorization rate. So we can see that every decline in transaction is actually a reduction in interchange revenue. So that's a big issue for issuers. And the third part is the what would I would call the fear for the mandates to come. So with MasterCards and Visa's mandates coming closer, how do issuers act fast before the fine arrives? So these three drivers, what it showed us is actually we can see the business case for tokenization is very strong, but how to operationalize it, meaning keep all these tokens alive across multiple cards, across multiple devices, that's an issue need to be solved right now.
Perfect. Yep. So that's something that we hear a lot at the papers too. Organizations feel that they're very well advanced, but they're oftentimes looking under the hood and realize that the reality is actually much more complex. But basically, Diane, your research really quantifies that gap. How big is it when you look at the actual maturity of those companies?
Yeah, that's a very interesting data contrast. So when we look at what issuers think, how mature they are, 70% said they're quite mature in their tokenization practice. And that is true if we only look at the front end, meaning cards are in Apple Pay and the card on file is tokenized and there are network tokens across Visa and MasterCards, and that issue is solved. But when we look under the hood at the back end, we saw 40% they are still at the very early stage for token lifecycle management as well as multi-scheme orchestration. And this is deeply rooted in the issue of discrepant data across the payment lifecycle, as well as the infrastructure. The legacy infrastructure is still built around PANs. So this contrast, what it shows us is that issuers, if they really want to be mature, they need to move from just being mature in the provisioning side to actually mature in the backend operation to become token-centric. So that's the really important point to be solved by issuers now. And most likely they can't solve that by themselves alone.
Absolutely. So, Cyril, when we talk to the industry, right, when we speak into the market, there's often this sense that tokenization is already well established. But as the data shows, there's actually a big difference between having it deployed and actually running it at the core scalable capability. When you look at the customers on the ground, does that gap resonate with what you see in practice?
I think that's quite interesting because we see exactly the same contrast as what Diane was mentioning. So first, when we speak with our customers, I think they generally believe that they are well ahead in their tokenization journey. And when you look at the figures, so you have more tokenized credentials than PAMs in Europe. Mm-hmm. And for some issuers, the ratio can be 10 tokens over 10 tokens for one PAM. So it's quite impressive. So figures are there to tell them, yes, they are well ahead. But in reality, the use cases that they implemented are quite simple. They remain quite simple. It's a wallet enablement, so Apple Pay, Google Pay. So it's e-com tokenization, and e-com is giving a lot of tokenized credential. But so the reality is that complexity is ahead of them. And why? Because payments are getting more and more complex, sophisticated. So with click-to-pay that is coming, with payment passkeys that is coming, and agentic commerce that is even, we have not scratched the surface yet. And there's one more thing that is very true in Europe, is that payments are very much fragmented. So in every country, more or less, you have a domestic payment network. So it means that when you are an issuer, you don't need only to implement wallets, account-file tokenization, click-to-pay, agentic commerce for Visa or MasterCard. You need to do it as well for the domestic option. And you need to find a way to orchestrate the payment credential very well between the two payment options. And you have also heard about VIPs, Wero, Swish, all the account-to-account payment alternative that are surfacing. So the banks have to also adopt those services. So you see, what they have done is impressive in terms of figures, but in terms of complexity, it's not there. So what we believe is somehow to be able to scale tokenization massively and to make it really industrial and operational, as you said. So they will have to manage a web of very various credentials, so a lot of wallets, a lot of use cases, and for that they will need to have a very solid platforms and a very different way of approaching tokenization versus what we have done today.
Absolutely. So I think that paints a really clear picture of what that gap actually is between issuers today and where they want to go. And it naturally, of course, raises the question, how do you actually close that gap in practice? So maybe, Diane, your research points quite strongly towards what you call a hybrid operating model as a way forward, and you have some clear numbers behind that. What does the data tell us about how organizations are actually approaching that?
Yeah. So what we see in the data is more than half of the issuers today are already using what we call an issuer-led hybrid operating model, meaning the issuers, they are still owning the core parts of the authorization logic, and they're still owning the relationship with the schemes, controlling the scheme integrations, and obviously the decisioning part. But what they outsource to the vendors and third-party partners are the operational layers, meaning the wallet SDKs, push provisioning, the lifecycle analytics part, and identity services. So these parts are outsourced to the vendors. And there's another 20%, they have adopted a partner-led hybrid operating model, meaning they outsource most of the lifecycle management to and orchestration to the partners. So combining these two data, over 70%, they are working with third parties on the token lifecycle management. So today, what we can see is that issuers building everything in-house for token management is not a common practice. It's actually an exception.
Absolutely, that's interesting. So, Cyril, what does that look like in practice, right, for your customers specifically, and how does that actually play out on the ground?
Yeah. So the situation in Europe is a bit specific, I would say, and it's not completely aligned with the global data, in a sense that the majority of issuers still do tokenization themselves. So they've started to do tokenization long time ago, and they still do tokenization themselves. But still, I don't think there is a blocker to outsource. And actually, the best illustration of it is that any issuer that has decided to launch their own wallet, and you know it has been very popular since the iOS has been open to issuers. So every issuer that has decided to launch their own wallet, actually they decided to use outsourced technology, to partner with companies like Thales. So even players that have a very strong in-house culture, like PayPal, Klarna, so those guys have decided to partner with a specialist, with an expert, because they realize that, yes, it's something different to manage mobile security, to manage performance of a mobile stack, and they don't need to reinvent the wheel. So the differentiation is going to come somewhere else. So we don't think there is a blocker to outsource. The second thing that we see is that latecomers to tokenization, so smaller organizations that do not support tokenization, when they move to tokenization, they select a partner because they realize that it's complex and they realize they can be much better, launch better services faster with a partner. So the issue is more with the entities that started in 2016, 17 to do tokenization and that have kept tokenization in-house. And for that, so the key message that we have is let's project us ourselves. Let's project us in 18 months, 24 months, where there will be a significant number of invisible agentic commerce transactions. So are we all confident that those tokenization platforms that were built like 10 years ago, they're still valid to address that trend and they're still robust and secure enough to make sure that a transaction that will be initiated with agent can be authorized? So that's a big question mark for us. So that's why we really believe that the trend that you are making in your paper is the way to go. And even organizations that invested a lot in the past on their tokenization stack, I think there is a burning platform now to change and to really reconsider their approach.
Very much. So, interestingly, Forrester's research actually suggests that many organizations are already reflecting on this. Over 40% say that in hindsight, they would have defined a clearer tokenization strategy earlier, along with the governance and architectural foundation to support it. So maybe, Kaio, if organizations recognize they are approached tokenization too tactically in the past, what needs to change now to make it truly strategic?
If we walk back and when tokenization started, so that was almost 12 years ago when Apple Pay was launched, and tokenization, or let's say Apple Pay was the catalyst for tokenization. So we are where we are now in terms of tokenization because Apple came and launched that beautiful service. But since then, what we saw is what you said, Diane. It's been of a mandate or compliance request. So every single bank, whenever they had to adapt or to add new services to their tokenization platform, they were treating like a mandate. It's a small fix. So you are singularly just taking one by one those needs, those mandates that are coming from the payment schemes, and you're trying to fix it and put it in production. But now, all of these patchworks of fixes that you've done over the past 12 years, they are running 40% of your transactions. So what do you do when a patchwork, an adjacent service, is running over 40% of our transactions, and soon they are going to surpass 50%. So it's starting to become extremely important for the banks to move a tokenization from an adjacent service towards the core element of their payment infrastructure. So for me, the shift is really about how they can think about moving from adjacent to core, tokenization becoming a core element, but ensuring that they can reach this state of the art that allows to support all of the fragmentation that Cyril mentioned, but as fast as possible. So I think that is a matter of finding the right partner, finding the right setup that allows you to move towards that state of the art, the state that they have to reach to be able to support fragmentation and support all of the coming innovations that are coming.
Absolutely. So to summarize, as we come to an end of this conversation, what we've heard here today is a clear shift. Tokenization is already widely deployed, but still often fragmented and largely used to solve immediate operational needs. At the same time, organizations are realizing it needs to become a core strategic capability with the right governance, architecture, and operational model to manage it at scale. And as this scale, complexity increases, which is why we're seeing the rise of more structured and hybrid approaches to bring everything together. That becomes even more important as we look ahead to more embedded, more automated, and increasingly AI-driven payment models. So we've covered where the market is today, the challenges of scaling, and what the shifts means towards a more token-centric model really going forward. So to close it off, I would like to ask each of you if there's one key takeaway you would want the audience to take away, to leave them with, and what would that be? So maybe to start with you.
I would say that choosing the right technology can bring a strategic lever for any kind of financial institution. So for me, that's about the time for them to start thinking about what they want to build next. Agentic commerce is coming. So do you want to lead that race? So we believe that having that partner can bring a strong ROI for any company. So it's starting to become in their hands now to drive that.
Diane?
Yeah, I think I will also be more forward-thinking as we close, because the future of payments won't be on the pens on the 16-digit number on a piece of plastic. It will be well-scoped token, intelligent token, and maybe in the future will be managed by machines rather than human, but obviously under our control. So what issuers need to do now is they need to think about what kind of payments infrastructure they need to build and how they build it, who they build it with. And that will define if they are the driver of the future or in the passenger seat.
Cyril?
So then I will finish with a more tactical or operational comment on top of what Caillou and Diane said. So as we said, so tokenization and payments are getting more and more complex and fragmented. So here the message is to issuers is do not reinvent or do not spend your high value engineering resources to do something that is just a level playing field. So just invest your energy focus on what is going to differentiate you in the market. And as payments are getting more and more sophisticated, so there will be a lot of room to find good ideas to differentiate in that space. And for the rest, just take a platform that is the best platform on the market.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for a great conversation. Of course, everyone can download the report, of course, and read all of the insights for themselves. And of course, they can find Thales, it's thales.com, where they can find all of the information. So I want to thank everybody for joining us at this Fireside Chat here at Money 2020. And till next time, thank you very much.